Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of the Coffee Roaster Warm Sessions podcast. We're at it again with another fresh episode for you guys, and today we're going to be jumping into a little bit into the world of brewing pour-overs at home, because I think most of us are either brewing coffee at home, pour-over, batch brew, espresso. Maybe a few people are brewing some French press at home, some siphon. If you have a siphon, bonus points for you, I guess. Don't
be brewing a light roast on a siphon, I'll tell you that. If you're a light roast drinker, do not buy a siphon. I don't know. I'm making stuff up.
Okay.
I would say, that's also that's not a joke, because that's also accurate. I don't think the siphon would bring you the best level up extraction to your brew game. Okay, if you're a listener of the Mirror Coffee Roaster Warm-Up podcast and you brew on a siphon, drop a recipe and Mark will pin it to the top of the YouTube page. Mark, I just put you on the spot.
There it is, folks.
Dude, I want siphon recipes. I want people to blow up the feed with siphon recipes. Honestly, I don't know. I'm going to look up and see if Lance has a siphon recipe. And if he doesn't, I'm going to straight up shoot him a text and be like, yo, I am dying for a good siphon dial-in, and I don't know what to do here. This coffee tastes like Arnold Palmer. Do you like Arnold Palmer's by any chance?
I don't know what that is.
It's there's this sugary sweetness it's a combination of lemonade and black tea. And the mouth feels super great. I think the only thing I might have done different on this brew is I probably added too much water.
What'd you add?
40 grams of coffee, 620 grams of water.
Is that what we usually do?
I don't know. Let me
do.
It should be
by 40. So 1 to 15.5.
Yeah.
So maybe,
but it kind of
maybe
tastes
a little more.
Maybe I should have just went a little finer.
I think as it cools, it starts to open up a little bit more. I think actually, in my opinion, I think we probably should have used the other water. Probably would have fit this roast a little better.
Gotcha. We'll talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the roast that we just cupped of it tasted better than this roast. This is a slightly further behind roast. Yeah. You're still getting a little bit of what I get, just a hint of just some tropical fruitness, nectarine, stone fruits. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm definitely getting stone fruits. It might be also a little bit of honey on it. Almost like a what's the honey I'm thinking? The honey with those little flowers. What are they called? The purple, green little flowers. Specific type of honey. I'm just blanking right now. Sometimes I wish we had a live audience, because this would be the perfect option. I would just yell out to the audience, "Hey, what's that flower?" and I'd get some feedback or a fact checker. Oh, clover.
Oh.
That's where it is.
Yeah. I would not have known.
Some clover honey.
Yeah. Yeah, that honey is definitely, the taste of honey actually is not something I thought about in this coffee, but it's definitely an interesting aspect here. Yeah. So, folks, this is a Colombian coffee. It's going to be dropping here in the near future. We just, when this podcast episode goes live, for those who want to pick up a no label batch, dial-in batch, no label dial-in batch of this coffee. It's going to go live right as soon as the podcast airs today, whenever that's either Saturday or Sunday. So go pick those up. Again, there's only a small amount of bags left. So if you want to jump in and get some, Sergi did kind of a random, I think, roast that happened to turn out really, really great. I think the specs, when I saw them, I was like, I don't know if this is going to taste
It wasn't complete. I'll be honest. It wasn't completely random. I was just trying to achieve something. And then mid roast, not mid roast, but like I was on the projection to achieve something.
By random, I mean not that he accidentally charged the coffee and it roasted accidentally.
No, I had a plan. Yeah.
I'm saying the plan was to go one direction, and then I'm glad you actually ended up just dropping it, even though it didn't quite hit the specs that we were looking for. Yeah, exactly. Because it gave us a coffee that I actually am like, okay, even though this is a little accidental, but it's probably one of the best roasts that I think I've tasted from us in a minute. So it's a special coffee. It's much lighter, or maybe not much lighter, but maybe a few stops lighter than what we.
What are you tasting on it to be much lighter in comparison?
In comparison to
any of our other coffees, like let's say, because these are, in my opinion, this coffee and our Miller Nanyas are in the ballpark of similarity. So if this one is much lighter than Miller Nanyas, what are you tasting?
It is a few stops. I mean points, but I guess it's hard to tell points because, as many know, it's very subjective depending on the reader that you're using and all that jazz. But it's just much lighter tasting. It's a little more, I don't know. There's a lighter mouthfeel, a little less of that sweetness, what we
delicacy,
call perceived sweetness. It's perceived sweetness, which is just like the combination of bitter and acidity. So it's a little more acidity focused, but still has some pleasant sweetness that's bringing out some nice clarity and flavor. It's nice and juicy. It's flavorful. I don't know. Not to say that the Miller Nanyas isn't flavorful, but it's a little bit more delicate. And just lighter in body. I don't know how you can say that, even though body is dictated. Again, this is actually a lot of the stuff that maybe we might talk about, but body is oftentimes you can just change body by shortening up your ratio.
Or even ratio in brewing, that is and just brew it little
100%. So, but from just a roast perspective, if you go darker, you're usually incorporating more body. If you're going lighter, so this is just delightful, honestly. So if you're looking for something like that, I'd highly recommend pick up the few bags that we still have left, because I drank like a lot of it. But pick up a few bags left, let it rest, and enjoy, I guess.
It's a good coffee,
something very discounted too. So
honestly, with all jokes aside, like this coffee is probably good if you're letting it rest for about 3 weeks. Minimum.
Easily. And probably more of a filter coffee than it is an espresso coffee. Like you can probably pull this on filter on espresso, but like all coffees, but you're not going to get as, maybe if you're looking for something more traditional, like a chocolatey sweet.
I mean, if you're looking for a ristretto, this is not a coffee to call as a ristretto.
Brew better pour overs, buy better grinders.
No, I think when I was thinking about this episode, like,
no, I did not mean that, by the way. So
I was thinking about this episode when we were planning for it, and I think it kind of stemmed from a few ideas that, again, going back to some of our previous episodes, the one with Alex where we talked about pour overs versus batch brew, that episode, and then also when we talked about our literally the previous week's episode, we talked about like drinking coffee and what do consumers are looking for in coffee. One of the things I hear from a lot of people I talk to who brew coffee at home is like, dialing in coffees. And literally I've had conversations with people when people would say like, oh, if it's a roast level of this coffee or this kind of flavor I'm trying to achieve, I'm going to use a different grinder, which there is a degree of truth to that. I'm not going to argue that. That's not the point.
Yes.
I think my main thing is like, hey, if you need to buy a new grinder for every roaster, then you're going to have to buy a lot of grinders. You know what I mean? Like, Prodigal, we only grind on, I don't know. The Comandante, right? In Macava, we only grind on the fellow Ode with Gorilla Gear burrs and this RPMage. You know what I mean? Like, or, Mirror, we only grind on the Weber Workshop key. Or, you know what I mean? Like stuff like that. Like that would be kind of insane.
Yes.
So my main thought is like, okay, when I'm talking to people about this, I'm like, yo, your grinder is just fine. Like,
right.
It's fine. It might not be the best.
Yeah.
But
and
it's deal with it.
I'm just going to caveat that with saying like, I mean, yeah, if you have like a Baratza Encore, some coffees may be a little more challenging.
Yes.
I mean, same with like when you mentioned the siphon comment, like,
yeah, right.
Same, like it's gonna be really hard to pull extraction out of a Baratza Encore.
There's a limit to
the Hario Slim hand grinder, with those ceramic burrs in there. But yeah, like, but if you have something that's like an Ode, which is already like a pretty, I'd say pretty decently affordable grinder, that can crush pretty decently with the SSP burrs, I'm like, the grinder's probably not going to make a 9-day difference for you at that point. So
yeah, there's diminishing return. And then also, like, if you want to tweak your pour over at home, like, if you have mid-level, you have good enough gear, like, try some other issues that's why I want to talk about them. Try some other solutions rather than saying like, I need a new piece of equipment.
For sure.
Right? There's a lot of quote unquote cheaper, less expensive ways that will make a night and day difference in your thing. And one of those things is like filters. Like I remember when both you and I tried Seabreeze filters, whether it was on the flat bottom brewer the Oria, or it was like V60 ones. To me, that was night and day difference.
Yeah.
Like that was almost as impactful as getting a, $500 more expensive grinder because of how the coffee tasted, how the coffee extracted, how my recipes worked on that. They're just super, super fast to a degree where you even were like, dude, I don't know if I even want to use these filters, right?
Right.
Because they played such a big, they had such a big impact on the brew. So and in my opinion, like that's that kind of fix you can make without investing a lot of money and see if it works. And some of the things that I found in the Seabreeze filters that have been pros, I don't brew every coffee on them, but when I know for a fact that the coffee is going to clog, I'm pulling out the Seabreeze.
Right.
They're just so much quicker. And when I know that I need to grind a coffee a little finer and I'm already grinding too fine and it's clogging because it's so fine, I'm bringing out the Seabreeze filters.
Right.
And that's like, to me, a classic is like a lot of the Ethia are upcoming coffee. I'm brewing on the Seabreeze filters at home. One, it's tasting much better because I'm able to achieve good total brew times on it in range. It tastes balanced, it tastes extracted. It's super good. When I use another filter, it's much more challenging to achieve the same results, But again, or decaf, that's another one. Like if I want to make some changes to my pour over at home with the decaf, I am automatically, the first change I'm doing is I'm using a different filter for it.
Yeah, correct. I took a few of those Seabreeze filters for myself before giving you them, and I just used the last one up last week on my Oria, so I ended up just like smashing the bottom for it to fit. It was just a really big difference. Like fixed all the the drainage issues, and actually they produce like a very interesting like flavor profile. And so I've enjoyed those. I also use I've switched to most of my brewing now being on the Oria. I don't know if I'm ready to go back to the V60, but using those Kalita wave filters. But I also know that Oria also has some filters. To be honest, I've not used them, but I guess they have some without the ridges, so that helps with a little bit of bypass. But that being said, also is like as soon as you eliminate those ridges, your brew's gonna slow down quite a bit.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so now you're thinking about, your drawdown time just changing simply because you just changed how your filter sits in your brewer. Even if sometimes if I'm like just messing around and experimenting, sometimes you can take the Kalita wave filters and just flatten them out on the side with water. It's like a very easy fix. And all of a sudden you have like a no bypass almost, or minimal. But then that also slows down your brew, which means that now you have to compensate in other ways, which can be beneficial. But again, it's one of those things where you did nothing different.
Yeah.
But to achieve maybe some slightly different results, all you did was just change how your filters are sitting in your brewer.
Yeah.
Which is
key.
It's cool. And it's fun.
Yeah, because I had a similar challenge when I was prepping for Brewer's Cup. Is I wanted to use the Seabreeze filters. I wanted my coffee to taste amazing with the Seabreeze filters. And the con was I wasn't yielding the flavor I wanted by extracting with those filters. And literally had Alex say, he's like, why are you pushing this too hard? Just use the Hario tabbed filters. They kind of work. I was like, fine. I'm losing a talking point here. But sure, let's do it. So those are...
But the tabbed are also faster than the non-tabbed, right?
Yeah,
a hair.
Think so.
Not as fast
I'm
as the
trying to
Seabreeze.
remember. No,
but I think the tabbed ones are
still
faster.
Pretty fast.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah.
So they're good. So that's like filters. Like if you really want to make a tweak, go buy a few filters. That's a $7 to $15 investment that will definitely affect how you extract and brew coffee.
Seabreeze ones are fairly more expensive, but they're not as expensive as a grinder.
Exactly.
So
totally.
So that's a quick little fix, and I think it's definitely a really good idea to just have a few different kinds of filters, and maybe one is just your go-to, but then when you come across maybe a coffee that's stalling, or maybe the flip side, the coffee is just draining and you can't get it to
that happens a lot.
Stop, then you filter. That does happen actually. Where you kind of have to flip the other way and pretty much reverse that a little bit. So,
totally. I
don't know.
So that's like filters, easy change. Another change that won't like break your bank and will definitely affect it is trying to brew different coffees, different roast levels with different types of water. And you and I have been like talking about that. The cupping we just did, we did the same coffee with different waters again, and same roast, same date, nothing changed. And there's no extraction challenges when you're cupping, right? But the water is going to yield and highlight, accentuate different flavors. So if you're brewing coffee at home and you're noticing, maybe I'm not getting the clarity of that I want. The flavors are there. They're maybe a little more muddled. I tweaked everything. I'm getting the same consistency of flavors, but they're not exactly the clarity. Like before you start blaming the roaster for doing a poor roast on this coffee, switch up the water. If you're using perfect coffee water, I don't know, toss in third wave water. Vice versa, you know what I mean? Go all out and get some Lotus, you know what I mean? And mix your own water, do something like that. So there's a lot of elements within the water game that also can affect now your flavor profile without just blaming it on the quote unquote roaster.
To add to that, I think like even just in our cupping, what we found was, again, same coffee, same roast, different water, is that, if we just had one cup out of the two, we're thinking, okay, we could push this roast a specific way to modulate the flavor profile. And then if we had the other cup, we'd actually push the roast the opposite direction. And to me, I'm like, oh, that's interesting because, if somebody who bought a coffee might thinking, oh man, that's, this coffee has a little too much either bitterness or is just, overly developed and is missing some of the volatile flavors or, or vice versa. This coffee is just too light and I'm not getting quite enough sweetness or some of those flavors coming through. That could be the case for sure. Like a roaster might have, done not the best job like that. That's a very common thing. But also on the flip side could just be that they're QCing with a different water. And the water that you have is accentuating different things that the roasters aren't even thinking about. And again, like we've said this a lot, that water is a huge thing in brewing water. One of the key components. And nowadays, I mean, we've been having this conversation. Now I'm like even convinced it's like one of the, like, it's even bigger than I thought. And so, so I mean, like a very interesting fix would be is to just look at, your roast color and being able to match maybe a specific water to it or, some roasters nowadays, like for us and others who have, actually mentioned that they need a specific water for their coffees to achieve the best results, which I think is great because that should take out some of the guesswork, but not all. Actually, many roasters don't do that. So you're kind of like trying to figure that out. And it's kind of complicated now that I'm hearing myself talk about it, but it's like, I think it's actually a very good idea to have a few packets of perfect coffee water, a few packets of third wave water, and maybe some Lotus drops to just figure out where you like it. And of course, if you're drinking coffee where you're like, man, I'm only drinking from these 2-3 roasters that roast the same exact way over and over again, sure, you've dialed it in. But if you're, just experimenting with different roasters, it might actually mean that you might have to change up a little bit of your water. So,
and again, like what we're talking about here is not like, oh, let's make your coffee taste from good to bad. We're more or less talking about like from good to even better, and that's an important caveat here. It's like you can get a decent cup with just, brew some with some tap water, whatever, but you might not get everything in the cup if 100%. You brew with tap water. So it's like that's what we're talking about. And then at the end of the day, I think a big factor in that is if you're going into a cafe and you're drinking the same coffee that you have at home and you're like, man, like what's going on? I'm even copying their recipe. I asked for their recipe. What's wrong? I would say water might be a big factor in the difference between what you're tasting in your local cafe versus the coffee that you're brewing at home, especially when it's the same coffee, right? And the same recipe. So that would be a very, very big caveat. The other thing I would say is like this one is like free of cost. Like you're not buying no packets, no nothing, even though packets are not that expensive. They're like what? A box of perfect coffee water is what? $15 or something like that. Like they're not that expensive. It's not a big investment, but you bought some different filters, you bought some new water or different water, and you've invested maybe like $30. This one is going to come at no cost, zero cost. And I can guarantee you it'll make your filter coffee at home taste way better. And that is change how you pour. So whether that's flow rate, how fast the water's coming out of your kettle, to how many times you pulsate and how often you pulsate. I've resorted, because like you were saying, you're brewing more in flat brewers at home now. I've resorted back to only brewing on V60. That's all I brew. Again, it's a comfort. I brew on V60 in the coffee shop, so this and that. It's a comfort level thing. So I tweaked my recipe to where I'm back to my bloom and 3 pulses now. Why? Because I almost, on my ode, I can almost grind a whole number coarser and achieve longer contact time.
Interesting.
So that's insane that the amounts of pulses I'm making, same dose, just a whole number coarser, and I'm still getting longer extraction times.
Which might help with, maybe a little bit of astringency, which might help with, just channeling as well, because now it's a little easier.
Quicker flow rate.
Yeah, you can actually probably make your coffee taste significantly like just juicier and tastier. Anyways.
Totally. Yeah. And that's one of the things I've noticed is like that. And then within the flow rate, also like how fast I'm pouring water. When I am doing more pulses, I'm usually pouring faster because I'm doing pulses like every 15 seconds on it. So I need to go faster. If I'm doing like longer, less pulses, I'm slowing it down, and then that will affect the contact time and the total brew time as well. So tweaking those elements it's not gonna cost you anything. You already have that fellow gooseneck kettle.
Right.
Like just tweak how you pour and how fast you pour. It's gonna make like a world of a difference, in my opinion. And it's also going to help with consistency. So you get the same repeatability between cup to cup to cup. Just notice how you're pouring.
Yeah. I think today I was just on Reddit, and this wasn't talking about filter coffee, but it was talking about espresso. The guy was just concerned why he's not getting the flavor that he's getting, and he's like, hey, do I adjust time, dose, or something? Actually, no, they were talking about filter coffee. They were talking about brewing anaerobic natural coffees. And so in the comment section, it was just like, oh, like, you need to change your dose and then change your water temperature and change this. And I'm like, just like take one thing and just try to keep everything as similar as possible and adjust your flow rate. Like, like it's going to be very hard if you're now adjusting your dose and adjusting this, adjusting that with a bunch of moving parts. Then you're like not even sure what is actually affecting your flavor. And so, yeah, just like keep everything the same and just say, hey, just this week, I'm going to try to nail down 3 pours as opposed to my classic 2. Yeah. And then just sit there. Yeah. Or, hey, I'm going to extend my bloom time by, 40 seconds or whatever. And I'm just going to keep everything the same and then try to dial it in and see what that changes.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and especially like when we were talking about like agitation and adding pours.
Yes, exactly.
Like, and then not only is that like changing literally how your coffee is extracting, but then it's going to change your grind size, but then it's going to change your contact time. Like just what I'm getting at is like just your pour is now shifting so many other variables that now you kind of have to account for, it just gets pretty can get complicated with just one simple shift. And then, when you talk about also then now swirling or tapping, now it's like, just on top of that, you're just like stacking stuff, and you can change up how your coffee's tasting just by adjusting those small things.
Yeah, and I think 2 goals of when you're doing filter coffee at home is, like you said, minimize the amount of variables you need to control. Mm-hmm. Make it as simple as possible. I love that Nate always says, like, dude, just dump some water on it kind of thing. Like, make it as simple as possible. Don't overcomplicate it. And then stop blaming the grinder for every single issue you have. Like, you have a decent grinder, I bet. Like, work with it. Like, if you know you have a very, very grinder, then, hey, maybe get a better grinder, invest. Christmas is coming. Be on the lookout for a good grinder kind of thing, right?
Right.
But the reality is, like, make it simple. Make these small little tweaks. And honestly, like, if you haven't changed your filters, if you haven't changed your water, and if you haven't looked into your flow rate, you haven't done those things. And if you're listening to this podcast, you're a home barista, you're brewing at home, and you're like, whoa, I didn't even realize those are elements of that could affect my extraction. Mm-hmm. Like, honestly, try those. Please let us know in the comment section. I'm really curious about people who have had different results within these factors that we talked about today.
If you don't have the super great grinder, definitely, if there's any piece of gear that I would say you should invest in, get a good spanking good grinder. That's probably one of the most important pieces. It's like, with cameras, it's like the lens is nearly just as important as the body.
Yeah.
Same with the camera. Same with coffee and grinders. Like, you can cheap out on, that $50 glass server, and put that towards your grinder fund. That will probably be better. But once you have a good solid grinder, you're good. Just learn how to dial in your freaking coffee really, really well.
Yeah.
Just be a master at that, and you're off to the races. Yeah. So
that's that.
There it is, folks. Another episode of the Coffee Roaster Warm Sessions podcast. Send this to a home barista of some, maybe a home barista that's like struggling to dial in their coffee. Send this over their way. And we'll have definitely some more home barista brewing home talks in the near future. We're working on potentially thinking about doing like another series that might be beneficial for y'all. So stay tuned for that. But as we always say, remember, reflect what's good.